Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Merry Christmas and happy first day of Hanukkah to those who celebrate. Got a good topic for you today. Let's do it. What's the creepiest or scariest thing that's ever happened during your childhood? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I used to roam the woods near our neighborhood with my friends, riding our bikes on dirt trails, building forts, playing cowboys, etc. But we used to go miles and miles from home, far enough that someone's dad had to drive out to find us one night when we stayed out past dark. I guess in the 80s it was considered okay to let your kids roam that far from home with no supervision of any kind. So when I was about 8 or 9 years old, we were pretty far from home and deep into a patch of woods that extended into a really large state park. Suddenly a couple of guys on white painted ATVs drove past us and further down the path. They were also dressed in white, as I distinctly remember thinking with my little kid brain that they were painters coming to paint something in the woods. So we followed the tracks of their ATVs to see what they were doing. We came to a little ridge where the path was shielded from some of the woods by a hill. We heard voices over the hills, so we crept up it and looked over the top. Turns out we'd stumbled onto a secret clan meeting. There were about 20 guys there, all dressed in white, some with the hoods and some carrying guns. They had assembled several benches in front of a makeshift cross and were greeting each other. They hadn't seemed to notice us, and the guns scared us enough to hightail it out of there. We went home and told my friend's dad about it. He took us back there the next day so we could show him where we had seen the gathering. It was empty. No benches, no cross. However, there were some markings in the trees like they had been cut by a pocket knife, and there were some bullet casings littered around. Pretty sure my friend's dad called the cops, but I never found out what was really going on there. Oh, strangest? I'm not sure if I posted this before either, but I don't check my comments for fear of being anonymously bashed about something I hardly care about. I had a waterbed as a kid, a full-on 70s waterbed with a mirror in the middle and everything. One morning there was an earthquake while I was asleep. Everyone else was awake, but I always took ages to wake up. Anyway, I started dreaming that there were bears shaking my house, bears wearing circus clothing and riding motorcycles. I woke up laughing like I'd been in an audience of actual motorcycle riding circus bears. It was strange, and I didn't find out there had been an earthquake for almost a week, so I thought there were actual bears outside my house shaking it. My family went to inspect our new house when I was about 10. Previous owners had moved out a week earlier, and it was my first time seeing the place. So, while my parents were upstairs doing boring grown-up stuff, I went exploring down to the basement. I was hoping to find some forgotten cache of toys or something, but it was cleaned out. I noticed a homemade sliding door closet was built under the stairs, the kind with the finicky folding panels. I started to open it. It was dark in there, but I could see jars on the shelf. It looked like it was just a pantry. Then I noticed the leather boots on the floor, which were attached to legs. Uh-oh. I looked up, and there was a man in there. Black leather jacket, backed up against the wall, staring down at me, eyes wide open. Never forget that feeling. I was so scared I couldn't even scream. I froze for a second, and then bolted. The worst part was that the closet he was in under the stairs, I had to run up, and they were the open style, so I saw his face again as I ran up, certain that he was going to grab my ankle. I kicked up a huge fuss to my parents on the top floor, finally convinced them to come down and check, but he was gone. They were convinced that I was lying or confused. Then they noticed the motorcycle helmet still in the closet. For years, I had the hardest time dealing with those stairs. I have two. First, when I was in elementary school, I took flute lessons at a local music store from an older man who had this teeny tiny room in the back of the store. I mean, this thing was small, literally just big enough for 2 folding chairs and a music stand, no windows. He was a really good flute teacher and always made me laugh. I really liked him. He would treat me more mature for my age, and of course, as a kid, I ate it up. He started telling me I was pretty and complimenting me on my legs and touching them a bit. I didn't really see anything crazy about this, but I must have known it was wrong deep down, because I casually told my mom one day, And of course, I never went back. Looking back, it could have turned out much worse. I totally trusted and liked him. The second, we were having a family reunion at our house, and my mom ran out of something or other at the grocery, so she sent my older brother and me to the grocery store. He had just learned to drive. We had this system. He would drive up, I would run in and get whatever, then pull around when he saw me come out of the door to minimize time at the grocery store. So I went in, got whatever, but I remember a man saying I was pretty in kind of a predatory way. I was like 14, the man was like 35, and sort of following me from a distance. I sort of rushed outside because I was creeped out. But when I came out, I saw the car, but it was parked, and he wasn't pulling around to get me. So I speed walk up to the car and realized that A, my brother was not in it, and B, the man, now two of them, had followed me out of the store, but they were heading in a different direction. So I waited in the car for my brother because I didn't know where he went. The men pulled up by our car in a big ghetto-ass brown van and got out and were coming towards me fast, saying, "Come with us, come here, girl," in Spanglish. I run around the front of the car and toward the grocery store, and they didn't follow. I found my brother in there, thumbing through magazines. I was so mad, and he didn't believe what had happened to me. Then I went home and told my family, but he said it wasn't true. No one ever believed me. When I was 8, I was bullied a lot by my older siblings. It was around Christmas time, and we were due to leave the next morning for Paris to spend time with my Uncle Rob in Paris. Oh yeah. I wished that my family would just vanish, and when I woke up the next morning, everyone was gone. It wasn't too bad, but then I started hearing weird noises, and these two strange men were trying to break in, as they had been planning to rob our house for a long time. I tried a lot of things to deter them, like heating up doorknobs, putting ice water on the stairs, and swinging paint buckets, but nothing worked. Just when one of them was about to bite my finger off, this creepy dude next door saved me. This happened one more time in New York, but then I faded from the public eye. I believe you, but my Tommy gun doesn't. I don't know if I can say childhood, but I was definitely youngish when it happened. I was at college, and it was about 2 hours before an afternoon final. Beautiful day outside, sun shining, and such while I'm driving to McDonald's for a quick lunch before I head back to campus. On my way back, I see cars kind of slowing down, and an 18-wheeler stopped in the opposite lane of traffic with a pushed-in bumper. Nothing all that impressive, no cops or ambulances. Then before I had time to comprehend the situation, there it was. Apparently a Toyota RAV4 went to make a left across the opposing lane of traffic and got hit by the 18-wheeler on a road with a 45-mile-an-hour speed limit. This woman is just outside the car, hysterical on her knees, in the middle of the other lanes. That's when I see her young 15 to 18-year-old daughter hanging a completely limp arm out of a completely destroyed passenger side window. The entire passenger side was bent in like you would picture a bow as an archer draws it back. My next sight is the crown of her head resting against the inside of the passenger side door with a clear and distinct river of blood pouring down the outside of the silver SUV's passenger side door. I got back to campus to meet my friends for some last-minute review, and I just sat in the chair shaking, unable to focus on existing. I told them all I saw my first dead body, my voice breaking while trying to comprehend the tragedy. Wildly traumatic, especially at the emotional state I was already in due to finals. TL, DR. Saw my first dead body seconds after an accident happened, right before a major final in college. When I was little, we had a garage sale. I was about 8 years old at the time, and I'm a girl. This guy came and bought a ton of big old little Tykes toys and stuff, like those big plastic sandboxes, airplanes, etc., for little kids. My mom walked away after he paid, and he asked me if I could help take the stuff to his truck at the end of our long driveway. Immediately, flags went up. I've always been afraid of a lot of things, but I said sure. He turned, thinking I'd follow, but I ran and hid under a table. I waited a good couple of minutes, waiting for him to finish loading his truck, and then crawled out. I looked around to see if I could see him, and I saw him standing in our driveway staring at me. I stared back at him, and then he turned and got into his truck and drove away. To this day, I'm still afraid that he would have abducted me. I mean, seriously, asking an 8-year-old girl to help move big, heavy toys into your truck? I don't think that's legit, mister. I agree that it is inappropriate to ask a small child to help you carry stuff, but if he just bought it, and I'm assuming your parents were there at the garage sale, so they saw the guy's face and he was making multiple trips back and forth, I mean, he should have asked your father or someone else, or do it himself. So yeah, it's creepy, and I would have felt more comfortable with my daughter staying near me, but I don't know if he maybe had truly devious intentions. He could be a bad criminal, or just normal dude, somewhere in between. Lived in a 2-story home with my mom on the 2nd story. Outside my 2nd story bedroom window was a patio awning covered with a plastic that crunched when you walked on it. I was the only window above the awning that didn't have a screen because I used to jump out of my window to play on top of the awning. I even had a neat wood fort on top. My bed was placed parallel to the window underneath it. Woke up one night after hearing the crunch of the awning. Suddenly I saw a hand right above me try to pull open my screenless window. After a futile attempt, I heard the crunching again, and then nothing. Quickly afterwards, I ran and shouted for parental assistance and investigation. They told me I was probably dreaming, despite nothing being preposterous about that happening. Made me never leave the window open at night again, because if it was, the mystery hand would have succeeded in its goals. Back in 1977, I was the youngest ever to successfully perform null point surgery. I have nystagmus. Signals from the brain don't get to the eyes properly, so they tend to move slightly from side to side. The operation at that point involved pulling the eyelids away from the eyes, cutting the 4 muscles holding the eye, repositioning the eye so the null point, place of least movement, is at the front, and then reattaching the muscles in place. So I was 2 when they performed the surgery. Afterwards, so the eyes could heal, they bandaged my eyes, and then, so I didn't pull the bandages off as a 2-year-old kid tend to do, they strapped me to the hospital bed for 2 days. My parents said the doctors told them they didn't want me to escalate my crying, so they didn't let my parents in to see me. Ooh. I was 14 and in the Boy Scouts, and we were on a canoeing trip down the Buffalo River in Arkansas. It was a 6-day trip, and it was just our little crew of about 10 boys and 3 adults. We had not seen anyone outside of our crew for days. We would canoe several miles and pick some random spot to sleep each night. This one night, I and a friend decided we were not going to sleep in the tent. We wanted to sleep in some hammocks by the river. I woke up sometime in the middle of the night being eaten alive by mosquitoes and decided that was a stupid idea and began walking to my tent that had my tent buddy had set up and was sleeping in without me. The field we chose to camp on that night was quite large, so the tents were spread out very far apart. I'm walking by one of the tents, and I see this shape huddled up next to it, and I assume it's the boy's backpack, but it is oddly shaped and could have been a person. It was very dark and I couldn't see. For some reason, I decided to kick it while I was walking past it to make sure it was just a bag. When I kicked it, it grunted in pain. It surprised the shit out of me. You must understand that we were in the middle of nowhere, out in the wilderness, so my first thought was that Adam, the guy who was supposed to be sleeping in that tent, was outside of it for some reason. So I knelt down beside him and asked, "What are you doing out here?" The man replied, "I like you people." That's when my heart nearly exploded out of my chest. This was a stranger. It was not Adam. Fear seized me. I noticed he had a knife in a sheath on his belt loop. I was trying my best to stay calm. I will never understand why I thought that I needed to get that knife away from him. I should have run screaming, but I didn't want to alarm him. I went to grab the knife, and he grabbed my arm and said, "You need to go to bed." I said, "Okay," and got up and walked the remaining 100 or so feet to my tent. I woke up my tent mate, damn near hysterical, just knowing he was going to come in any second and kill us. I woke him up and told him the story, and he, being much braver than me, went out there and walked around and came back and said he didn't see anyone and he thought I was making the whole thing up. The next morning, when I woke up, he told me the adults wanted to talk to me. I walk out of the tent, and I can see people's shits just strewn everywhere. Apparently, the guy, whoever he was going outside each tent and going through their backpacks looking for stuff to steal, I guess. One of the adults had an expensive camera missing. The adults went and searched for signs that someone else was in this part of the river, but never found anyone or anything. To date, that is the scariest moment of my life. And I thought, I'm 31 years old now, and my wife mocks me, I still sleep with a nightlight. When I was around 5, my dad decided to move us from Maine to Texas. One night of the drive, there was some heavy snow as we drove across Oklahoma, and my dad decided to stop over at a motel. This was really exciting for my older sister and me, so after we got settled in the room, we went outside to explore. The guy at the front lobby was an old man around 60, but quite kind. I asked him his name, and he told us Donald. He started talking to us and telling us stories that I can't really recall, but he made our night. As we left to go back to our room, the man handed me an apple and told me, take a look at the pictures on the wall on the way out. The next morning, we were leaving, but when we got to the lobby, I remember what Donald asked me to do. So I started looking at the pictures, all old black and white photos of horse racing, dated early 1900s. One photo in particular caught my eye. It was of 3 old guys standing in front of a racetrack, but the one in the middle stood out. I got really creeped out, but looked to the caption to the left and read, Donald, Center. I made my sister come over, and she freaked out. It was one of the most surreal experiences of my life. We both searched for him with the time we had left, but he was nowhere to be seen. If some of you think this is fake because of the little details I've remembered, I've told this story really often to anyone who will listen, and I also made sure to write it down at the time so I wouldn't forget. I'm not a big believer in ghosts and stuff, but I can't ever come to an explanation about this story. I was about 9 years old when my parents decided to take me and my 2 younger siblings, who were 3 and 4 at the time, to Disney World. While we were there, we would often eat out at restaurants, as vacationers usually do. On our way out of a Red Lobster, I had been dawdling behind my parents with my nose to the ground for some reason or other, and a good deal of distance had grown between us. As we were walking out, a black man and his female partner, dressed in African clothing, were walking toward us in the parking lot. They had passed my parents, and the man walked up to me and placed his palm across my forehead. I was rather confused to be suddenly stopped and have my head tilted upward unexpectedly. He muttered something I didn't quite understand, and then they walked off. I stood there bewildered and looking at my parents for some sort of direction. They had caught sight of it and were apparently just as confused as I was. This was in the mid-70s, and we lived out in the country in Indiana. When I was very young, maybe 7, my father worked nights, and my mother began seeing a peeping Tom looking in our windows. Scared the shit out of all of us, but the cops could never find anyone. Then he broke into our house while we were away, stole all of her panties and bras, and beat our beagle to death. My 2 older brothers began carrying pellet pistols in their belts just to feel safe. One night she saw the peeper looking in. She managed to play it off and got my older brother from down the hallway. She went back in her bedroom to draw the perv's attention, and my brother popped around the corner and shot the asshole in the eye right through the screen. We all ran outside. That fat was doubled over kneeling, holding his bleeding eye and screaming. Mom bashed his goddamn skull, back, arms, legs, and everything with an aluminum bat to keep him from getting away, while my brother shot him over and over with the pellet guns. I was terrified at first, but eventually got my kicks in. Felt wonderful, after the fear that sucker had put us through. Gets my blood up just thinking about it, and this was 35 or so years ago. Invade my house. My little Chuck Taylors will invade your throat, you dirty... Eventually, she had one of my brothers go call my father at work. Dad was a drunken lunatic on a good day in the first place, so after he rushed home, he absolutely dismantled the goddamn pervert who had terrified us all. I can still hear the sounds the guy made. The police eventually arrived. They found the guy's truck down the road with a box of panties and bras from who knows how many houses in it, He also had what they would now call a R-kit, and he had a metal bar with matted blood and dog hair on it. This being the 70s, one policeman put the effer in the squad car, and the other tipped his hat, shook all our hands, and bid us good night.